Yeah. Back at it, guys.
Back at it, literally, and so happy to be back at it.
Yes, let's go. What we got?
So Kamala out here, Kamala done got herself slammed for false attacks on the Florida school teaching benefit of slavery. So, you know, she's saying that it's she's trying to get on Ron DeSantis, saying almost like it's inhumane that he wants to pull that critical race theory and stuff like that out of the school system. And she's trying to, I don't like how people that are wealthy, that are rich and wealthy, use the slave theory to help them with the political vote. And I don't like that the fact that all the people that focus on slavery, I'm just saying this, you know, all the people that's pushing the whole slavery thing, they married to white men. So you talking about slavery and injustice. So if that's the case and you so big slavery, why your husband white? And you so against white slavery? No, because that's what they've been talking about.
Okay,
I think
so let's just tap in. Many of you may already know what critical race theory is, and others may not. So what is critical race theory? Critical race theory is a set of ideas holding that racial bias is inherent in many parts of Western society, especially in its legal and social institutions, on the basis of their having been primarily designed for and implemented by white people. So they're saying that based off certain legal and social institutions, that based off of it being designed by white people, then we're going to have some racial biases just because of the fact that it was designed by white people. And I truly don't agree with that at all.
And she wants to slam Florida for not continuing perpetuating and just keeping this slavery theory. People ready to move on. If people keep pushing that, it will always take longer to get ahead because people still hold on to that chain.
And I think it's been long enough. You
time.
can't equate the fact that it still exists. However, it's on a case by case basis. And everything should not be looked at from that lens. We've talked about this in several videos.
Yeah.
So let's dive into this. But I do like Ron DeSantis' stance when he's approaching the things that many other states are allowing into their states. He is completely fighting against it, and I
said that coof.
Really love that.
Yeah, he does it with the little, you know.
Over the weekend, Vice President Kamala Harris delivered remarks and criticized the new curriculum approved by the Florida Department of Education. Let's hear some of what she said.
In the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
The new curriculum says instruction includes how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit.
CNN political commentator.
And look how she pushed it, and then how it's really was written. It's a difference.
I mean, I can see where the keyword benefit has been a problem, and I think there was a Republican Congress that had a slight issue with a sentence in that.
Okay.
However, just think about how horrific slavery was, and to be under those conditions and to learn or be taught a skill that you could later use once it was over, still gave them a skill set that they may not have had prior.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
We can't worry about what they were doing in their country before they got to America.
Correct.
Many of them may have already been enslaved, and they were. Many of the slaves were already slaves.
Yeah.
Black people were already slaves.
They were already slaves
before they got sold.
Some.
You know, right. So we don't know that some of them could have been free and some of them could have not. But nevertheless, I understand what they meant, but the wording could have been just a little different, because you see how benefits is being misconstrued.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Commentator Scott Jennings roasted Vice President Harris on her apparent, according to him, misrepresentation of this situation.
See,
let's watch.
What I'm saying.
This is a completely made-up deal. I looked at the standards. I even looked at an analysis of the standards in every instance where the word slavery or slave was used. I even read the statement of the African-American scholars that wrote the standards, not Ron DeSantis, but the scholars. Everybody involved in this says this is completely a fabricated issue. And yet, look how quickly Kamala Harris jumped on it. So the fact that this is her best moment, a fabricated matter, is pretty ridiculous in my opinion.
On the flip side, CNN commentator Karen Finney praised Harris's comments.
It was a stellar moment, and I think she did something that she has done often in the last couple of years, which is in a moment when something needed to be said, she got out there and said it and really channeled what people were feeling. I mean, the idea that we would literally have a conversation, I mean, I have to laugh, it's so disgusting, that there were personal benefits of any kind to slaves. That's like saying women, you know, were happy when we couldn't vote and we couldn't have our own banking accounts. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
So one of the analyses of the standards was done by Charles Cook in National Review. He's listed the 191 times slaves, slavery, etc. appears in the standards. I'm reading through them. I don't think they would be controversial to basically anyone. It very much seems to me from reading them that how horrible and inhumane slavery is being recommended to be taught in these very specifically in so many contexts.
See, I want to say this. All right. Slavery was extremely inhumane. I want to say skills that were built were inherited skills from slaves. So just saying, I'm just saying directly, look at the benefit you benefit. Made me look at the generationals that benefit from that were taught skills in their family line that were great. But just saying, no, that's a horrible system.
And I think the word, and it's all going to be in the mind of the beholder and how they are using or receiving this word in the context of all of it. The key word of benefit, the benefit, it seems if they had picked a different word and replaced it with something else, it may not be such controversy.
I think that was her wording, benefit.
When he read it in the standard, that word is in the standard.
But I don't remember. You sure it said the word benefit?
I think that's what it said. Yeah, that's why they're having such a big problem with it.
Okay.
They use that key word.
So I do think from looking at this that Kamala Harris is greatly exaggerating her narrative for how bad these standards are. But what was your takeaway?
Yeah, so I read through the actual curriculum. I still have it up on my computer. And I mean, they do recommend teaching the actions of Nat Turner, John Brown, Frederick Douglass, and responses to their efforts to end slavery. It's a pretty thorough curriculum, which leads me to wonder, how would a teacher teach all of this in 1 year or one semester? Are they picking parts of this which they focus on more than others? In which case, it would be concerning that there's such a large amount of information to be taught on slavery pre-1619. Slavery in Africa, slavery in Asia, a lot of claims about the existence of slavery before European colonizers arrived there in Africa.
That's in here. A lot of that is in here.
A lot of that is in here.
Instruction includes how slavery was utilized in Asian, European, and African cultures, identify Afro-Eurasian trade routes, describe the contact of European explorers with slave trading in Africa, the connections between Russian serfdom and slavery, and so on.
Exactly.
Right. And it might be a little bit too much of a focus on that, right? I think there's a complicated history there that I don't know that a high school teacher can tease through. It's the kind of curriculum that I didn't get till I was, a concentrated major in African studies and the international studies major that I had in undergrad.
See, that's another thing why I'm saying, like, this is how we keep being trapped in that system. You can't teach it all the key stuff that you really need to hear about the process of slavery, but you pick out the stuff that makes you angry, mad, hate the white man. So if you're not going to put it all in there, if you're not going to put all, which you can't, because that is an unlimited amount of history, take it out. Teach people how to study these things at home. The family needs to teach the truth on these things. But just trying to put them picking pieces in there, no.
Well, no, I mean,
no.
It depends on how it's being taught. If they put it in the book, then, in their minds, they're thinking, well, maybe we can get through all of this. But I do like the worldview perspective, because that's what they need to know. They need to know it was a worldview, and actually slavery was going on in this country of where the slaves were being sold.
Correct.
Slavery started there. I mean, it was already going on, and it was a world trade. So it wasn't just to America, it was all over.
Yeah, correct.
And it was still, they were being really treated heinously in other countries besides Western.
Before Americans were doing it.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, not Americans. Europeans were doing it.
So the way you can couple it and package it and say all you want to say, but it was still horrible no matter where you went. There were certain populations that didn't treat them as bad, but they still were mistreated.
Africans and Arabs treated their slaves by the worst.
And we got video content on that. We're not going to dive back down that whole rabbit hole. But in the benefits, the key word benefits here. I don't know. I thought he mentioned that they read that word verbatim in the the topics or what do you call them?
That
standards.
article. Yeah.
But if not, based off what she's saying, is that based off how they're trying to teach that there was some type of benefit of, being a slave.
I just don't believe that a lot of that information needs to be taught.
So, well,
I think it needs to be researched, because a person can pick what they want you to read on that.
No, I mean, I still feel like it's relative, because we have all the mistruths or the misfacts about it. So if we have the gaps in between, they need to fill in the gaps with the information so they can get it from a world perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They need to be able to know that it was a world
slavery.
It was a world view,
Yeah.
and that is how the countries across the world built their societies.
Yeah.
Was through that world economic system.
Right.
Don't just get your mind set on Western society. That was the only country out of the 7 continents that was doing. North America was the only country that had slavery. That's absolutely incorrect. And by them telling them this, having this in the books is fair. You need to know that it wasn't.
Slavery goes back biblically. It goes back a way.
So I think this is relative. I think it's relative.
Okay, from a standpoint of world slavery, and not pick and let me tell you how painful it was and how we were treated.
No matter how you sum it up, those are still the facts. But they're giving them, I think it's more behind the scenes stuff versus just the mistreatment.
Yeah. But that's all we were taught. We were taught the mistreatment. We weren't taught the world.
We weren't taught the world, but we also taught about a lot of the slaves that were able to be free, that, like she was naming some of the people that they're going to highlight who, became, prominent, who became wealthy, skills that they learned, the name, all of that goes, and you should, because that definitely helps raise the morale and the mindset of positivity for the kid, especially the black kid that's hearing about this, because this was primarily your culture who were the ones been enslaved.
And they don't think about all the slaves that, the numbers of slaves that got free, educate themselves, and then slaved, had wealth, and then they slaved.
And that should probably be in there too.
Yeah.
And it's something that has taken a lot of effort to get to be recognized, the contact of Europeans to Africa. What was Africa like before that? This idea that people were kidnapping their brothers and sisters and cousins and selling them as slaves is just not something that is backed up by anthropologists and historians. And it seems to me that there's a lot of focus on that in this curriculum, which is concerning. It's not that it's everything, but it's certainly there. And this contrast in the media coverage of this, the claim that it's fabricated, I think is not true. Those exact words are in the curriculum. And teachers can expand upon that. And so for folks to be talking about that in mainstream media is concerning. The one thing I will say about Kamala Harris's appearance is that she uniquely had approved talking points seemingly before appearing in public this time.
Yeah, she had something to say that I think was wrong. It made grammatical sense. Is
unique.
An improvement for her. And I guess so. The specific thing they're up in arms about is the teaching that
personal benefits.
Slaves, there were personal benefits that some experienced during slavery that allowed them to be successful in their lives, and then after slavery. I think there's certainly like a way of saying that sound, and maybe that was a clumsy phrasing for it.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
I don't think, obviously, the suggestion should not be that slavery, despite being bad, was still somehow beneficial.
No.
Slavery was definitely not beneficial.
No.
I think what they were just trying to do is recognize that some enslaved people, learned to read or learn skills that actually weren't supposed to learn, but people taught them. They learned from each other. Some people went against what the slavery regime prescribed that you were supposed to do, and that it's just a historical fact. Not that it was ideal, or that we're saying it's good, or that.
And two, I wanted to say is that it made me think that we know personally as an individual, if they're being enslaved and being mistreated beyond, what we can recognize, because we haven't experienced that. However, if there's a slave that's in the house versus one that's not in the house, in the field, or in the little cabins or whatever, then they were able to receive a higher, better treatment to a degree versus the one. So keyword benefit could be deemed in them being in the house benefited compared to the ones that did not. But I do see where the word can be very,
controversial.
Controversial. And I do think that it should be, changed if that word is in there.
Yeah, it shouldn't be benefit. It should be.
We're able to receive skill sets that helped them later in life. I mean, but that means it's a benefit, but you're still explaining it in a different way.
Skill sets of slavery, not benefits of slavery.
Yeah.
It lessens the evil of slavery, but just the reality is that enslaved people had lives and culture and some even within the regime of slavery, economic growth and conditions and learning that did allow them to flourish even under slavery and after slavery. But that is not an excuse for slavery or something, a box to check. That's despite slavery. Right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think that's how a good teacher would take this curriculum.
Despite slavery, these people thrived and achieved something and bettered themselves in their stations, and were prepared to survive, to do even better without it, despite slavery, not because of it. Maybe that's the framing.
Yeah. Right. And slaves developing skills that could be used for their personal benefit is the kind of sentence that's what was their personal benefit? We will teach you how to till the soil and pick the cotton, and the personal benefit to you is you won't get beaten by your master if you do these things. Seriously, that's what I get from that. But also to frame it as this kind of large skills training. We're teaching people a trade, and slavery is just this big, charitable project to teach people skills. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. But I don't know. But I think Kamala Harris was reading that into it because she wants to be big mad about this.
Yeah, I think she wanted to have a moment.
Or whoever wrote her.
Because she ain't had nothing else popping off in her term, so she got to have something that can keep it going and something that can boost up the Democrats to get ready to start voting for them again.
But I can definitely see how, I'm going to play the devil's advocate in that, I can see how the word can be misconstrued based off of how you're reading it and how your internal, feelings and, I don't want to say being vulnerable, that's not the right word, but interactions or things that, not even interactions, but experiences that you may have had around it as a context. Yeah. Whether you've experienced racism, whether you have dealt with certain things, and all of that could be in a person's mind when they're reading these things, or you've known somebody that has some injustices that maybe not you experienced it, but I think it's going to be, that's why people who read that is going to be taken, in context based off of the experiences and the mindset of the person that's actually reading it.
Okay.
Because the word benefits, in spite of, I like that a lot better, because that can be read pretty much the same way. When you read that word benefits, it's like
not benefits. Benefits sound like a gift. Or it sounds like something that you deserve.
Not so much benefits, but then on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, the ones in the house did benefit from being in the house because they weren't being whipped as bad, or than the ones that were enslaved.
It's a bad word.
Exactly, it could be flip flop, but yeah, I think they should have picked a different word.
like Gen Z language of like gaslighting. She really wanted it to go viral. And it's this common cringe thing that politicians do now, where they say things in a way where you just know they're trying to go viral. There's no righteous indignation in the word, they're trying to gaslight us. I'm sorry, but using pop culture words in this scenario, just it doesn't land.
Gaslighting has just become like the most overused term for everything, right?
Yeah, it
Everyone's
is.
gaslighting everybody all the
Gaslighting,
time.
gaslighting.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think the problem with the curriculum is simply that it can be interpreted, because it's vague, and interpreted in a direction where they can minimize what slavery was and the impact of slavery.
Yeah. Right,
And
but
I think that's the main problem with
But I
it.
don't think they're trying to do that.
Right. They
Right.
could. It could.
I mean, there's 160 or however many mentions of slavery, and very much. Again, I haven't read every single one of them yet, but it gives you the impression that slavery is bad. Like I don't think schools are actually out there teaching that that slavery is not bad. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know. I think we're going to find out. I think there's
they're
going to be
teaching
much
that
more
it's bad.
attention on this. And I think now there's going to be kids that have their cell phones in classrooms. And if a teacher's taking this curriculum in the other direction, they're going to have heard their parents talking about it on the dinner table or heard about it in the news and think.
I mean, I'm sure there in some southern school districts in the past there's been, I'm not sure so much different spin on slavery was bad, but maybe a different spin on the Civil War was actually fought over states' rights rather than slavery. Sure, there's a whitewashing of or whatever you want to call it of how bad the Confederacy was and how structured over slavery it was and lost cause. Okay, I get all that. I know some of that went on. Evolution is true. I know. Schools aren't always teaching what good progressives want them to teach and that sort of thing. Fine. But I'm looking at what they're doing in Florida, and it seems like this stuff seems pretty normal at the K through 12 level. It seems pretty within keeping of what history is. So
growing up in a northern state, in Connecticut, and then now living in the South, I feel that the way the northern states teach slavery sows division in the country, because they teach it from the perspective of we were so benevolent and good, and we wanted to stop it, but they wanted to keep the slaves. That doesn't make sense, because who imported the slaves? Where were the largest slave auctions? New York City, right?
You're not letting Massachusetts Bay Colony off the hook here.
Right, exactly. They were also complicit. In fact, they sold it to them. Think about what happens if you're selling drugs. You are the drug dealer, and you get in trouble and you get booked, and someone who bought the weed or drugs also gets booked.
Right.
Who gets in more trouble? The one that was selling the stuff. And so the way that the North frames themselves is totally innocent. They were also benefiting from getting extremely cheap raw goods from the South. Their economy and their economic well-being and them getting rich depended on slavery. They were entirely complicit. So that also needs to be taught, I think, in northern schools. There's a lot of changing of the curriculum to be done. But there's some good stuff in this curriculum, and there's some stuff that I think is vague and could be taught in bad ways.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this.
I'm definitely going to take a deep dive into it. I'm curious to see what it's really about. I saw this come up, and I was like, and I just saw one part of the clip, and I was like, okay, let me think about it. But I kind of agree with, what the young man was saying, is that, I don't think it's going to be a school that's teaching.
Talking that this is sweet.
That was just
the benefits of the slavery,
exactly,
one-on-one.
That was just the thing to do, because we know, I just don't see it.
No.
Especially as touchy as that is. And
before you teach the benefits of it, it just don't need to be in there.
yeah, I don't think there was, so.
It just don't need to be in there.
I can see how the word could be quite controversial. I could see. However, I think it's taken out of context. It can be taken both ways. If a slave is in the house versus, but there was no alternative method back then. You were a slave. If you were an African American or a black person in the U.S. or anywhere else in the world, you were a slave.
Unless you had money in your paper.
So what there was a certain time that it got to be that, but it didn't. I don't know. Did it ever start out to be like that? Were they ever free in any place of the world outside of Africa where they were being sold, and then it's flipped?
I need to go do my research, because when I read something that passed that everybody, the majority, but everybody wasn't chained up and with the crew.
Well, yeah, I don't remember reading that or hearing in one of the videos that we did about it being where if it started out that way when they started exploring all over the world,
I think
it
that only
changed.
I think that only flew for the ones they brought over and the one they said ownership over. I don't think every black person, and I don't think there are some instances where people weren't a part of the slave trade.
Okay.
But blacks were, like I said, they were cheap labor. You get 4 slaves for one white slave. It was a cheaper labor that they used to use.
All right.
All
well,
right, but I don't live.
But I am glad.
I don't live off that. I'm off the plantation. So
I am glad that they are teaching it from a worldview perspective. It's
Yeah.
going to behoove the teacher to get in there, absorb this information, and get creative and get jazzy with what they do as the expert in the classroom.
yeah.
And make it presentable and make it where
Do you feel like this should be taught in the schools still? Should slavery still be taught in the education?
I think
system?
the level of awareness needs to be, because they still have a misconception of what slavery was all about. So it needs to be corrected. Yeah, it does need to be corrected.
Okay.
It needs to be corrected, but I
So-
don't think it needs to be a 2 and 3 year process of this. But like she was saying, how are they going to learn all this in,
So let me ask you this:
1 year?
If this is okay being in school, what about sexuality to the youth? Is that okay to put that
You
in?
mean about the sexual orientation?
Yeah.
Well, the mere fact that it's in our society, once again, the level of awareness. You may need to understand what it is, but I don't think it needs to be taught in a persuasive method. It just needs to be taught as information.
Okay.
In a particular, it could be a health class, and I don't even know why it would really need to be taught in sex education. But I guess now things are so different from when I was in school versus how things are now.
Yeah.
It's shifted. So it may need to be made aware of in sex education because it's real. And there in the state of California has deemed this mandate in the school systems for this
Yeah.
information to be known.
Yeah.
So I think it should be a level of awareness.
Yeah.
But I think they should have permission slips, or there should be some form. It shouldn't be forced, because if a parent doesn't want them to learn about this level of awareness in school, then they ought to have it where if these parents sign and say, I don't want my kid to have privy to this information, there needs to be a reroute to another class
Right.
where they're taught something else. I know I'm wrapping it up, but you asked the question, so I'll be here.
Okay. You told me. All right, I'm about
That's
to,
your response.
I'm stuck. All right. My baby would always get on me about tap on leg when she go too long, and I would say it out loud, and she'd be like, "Don't tell people that."
Oh, not that. It's
And-
the fact that you want to go. He want to go. Rah, 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 but then we let me
Like
get my
a
2 cents
crowd.
in it.
Don't take a nose dive, but
But
comment in
comment
the
down in the
section
section
below.
below.
Go
You want
to
smoke.
make sure y'all go to Buy Me a Coffee, see one Snapper, and also y'all go to Snapper Red where she does the Snapperlytical, where y'all can see everything
We
over
getting
there.
that channel to
Everything.
10K. Let's go.
10K Snapperlytical, Snapper Red. Man, we'll see you, man. Bye.
Yeah. Bye, guys.